All right, so while we were gone, I cut out that part for the canopy for the cockpit. And you can see there's that former shape there. Not really sure how that goes, but some good and bad things happen. Those don't connect. That's where the wing is going to go. But things like my panel lines in most cases actually do line up really well, um, which is fine. So there's good and bad. Now this thing here, I'm not sure how that's supposed to go. I have no clue. But we'll keep moving. So these are the next parts that go together. And I did the other parts in the front on the left before I videoed for you because they were all sort of the same. This is the first part that's really kind of a confusing thing. It's pretty complicated. Look at that. There's multiple tabs. There's one on each side, one there. There's going to be some pedal teeth there, and there's going to be another one of those on that side. Not to mention connecting strips on either of those. And then this part is the start of the air scoop underneath, which is going to be rather difficult. So the first thing to prep that big piece is to start putting those little tabs on the various spots. Doing the same thing as always, thin the tab, glue it, get off the excess, put your piece down, line it up with the little dotted lines, and push it down to help make the cement adhere. Saw teeth, there's the center. They always nicely draw the center, and there's my center, this little center line. You can't see, a little tick right there. Right there. Hard to see it. But you line that up, glue this thing together, or put glue on it just like before, like every other time. Take this, line up my little line with that centerpiece, and then just make sure that all the dotted lines match up, and you cover them slightly, and then you just again push down and make them nice and solid. And I tend to rub these back and forth, make sure they're again nice and stuck. Here I'm putting on one of these little pieces for this other little tab. And again, I'm showing you this because this one is a complicated piece. There's so many multiple things going on. It's a complex pattern and a complex shape ultimately. In fact, I ended up doing a couple missteps, and I'll try to show you what happened. Everything turned out fine, but I had to sort of put pieces together and then figure it out on the way. Now I'm working on the little scoop part. So that part comes all the way around to a circle, that first part that looks almost disconnected. That's going to become like an oval shape essentially, and then have a little former put on the inside to give it actual final shape. This is just a lovely mouse pad. You never see the other side. Oh, it's a beautiful Lancaster, wonderful airplane. Anyway, using my trusty Lancaster mouse pad to again start shaping this odd thing, and you have to roll it back and forth many times and get it to the right shape, again approximately, so that you can put all these things together. All those tabs are going to have to come together at some point. And the two main ones are those two up there, and the longer ones by that 7. I do tend to label my pieces, especially when they're confusing, because you do get confused after a while when you're working on these. Invariably, I'll try to put things in backwards. You've already seen me put the radiator in the wrong way on the cowling. That was a radiator, by the way. I looked it up. I was wrong. So here's that biggest strip being glued up. And again, once it's already been formed, it comes together easily. This is not a difficult operation. If you don't form it, then you're fighting it, and that doesn't work. So make sure you form everything right. Then when you line things up like this, add your glue. It's not going to be difficult. It will be barely an inconvenience. And squeeze it tight, make sure it's together, and then I'm just testing this, and look at that. It starts to fit real well. Slide it around, so I'm matching up that top piece where the top wing is going to go, and I look at the other side, it's looking pretty good. Push it a little bit, and you can make that white essentially disappear. Looky there. So that's sweet. That's going to be really good. Essentially, once you fit things, you just got to add glue and let her rip. But take the time to adjust things, make sure things fit. Now start playing with this radiator piece. Now that piece I'm working on, that has to be rolled all the way because that ends up being completely curled around. The other part's going to go up into the piece that's in front of it, or on top of it essentially. So this is just same old, rolling this around, attaching it, and holding it in place to dry. A lot of this paper modeling is very repetitive. People who put together things like tanks, and they got to put together 18 gazillion little trucks and wheels and springs. It's mind-boggling what they do. My paper modeling is not that advanced. Now I'm trying to look at the plan and figure out where all these formers go. There's that one, which is in the back of the piece I just put in. Then there's this little G former, which ended up being confusing. And then there's that little guy. Now that guy is the front of this little air scoop. It's kind of curious where it ends up. I ended up putting it in maybe, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch inside just to give it shape. But like all my other formers, I found, or most of them, I found that it had a gap around the edge. And guess what? Just like all the other formers, I put tissue around it, or tissue. I put tape around it. Now I'm test fitting these other pieces. I'm marking my little center line from the outside, and then I'm marking where the former, the edge of the former goes. So again, when I put all these things together, this helps me know the former's at the right depth. So there's my F former, and I'm putting in, so I'm lining up the vertical line on that red slot, and then making sure they all look good, and making sure it comes down and forms on either side. Now see that one, no tape was necessary, so I don't know what was going on. That one's perfect. Didn't have to put any tape on it. Put it together, put it in that piece, and it comes down on either side just perfectly. So I'm still at a loss as to why my formers are off, or 9 out of 10 of them or whatever. Put a little glue on there, make sure she's lined up first, and then match it all up to the little red tick marks, and you just put her in and hold it in place and let it dry. This is a little bit different than the other ones because it's not going in a whole cylindrical piece. But once it's together, there you go. And you can see that when that goes on there, you're going to have a really neat fuselage, and the back end will be ready to accept the next parts. Excuse me. So put a little glue on there so I'm satisfied that everything fits. And like the other piece I showed on the last video, line up that bottom seam. Everything else should then be lined up within reason. You swoosh it around, you mush it, you flip it around, you get rid of the excess glue, and you sort of twist it. You might want to go in there on the inside, like from that open piece with a long handle of a brush, and make sure that the tabs are up against the paper. But basically, you just go back and forth and make sure it's right. And you can see that, again, if I haven't coated these parts with the wrong overcoat, these seams are actually really good and indicative of the real airplane. The one at the Smithsonian has huge gaps in it. So there's former G, which again gave me some issues at first. I can't remember if I put this one in and then take it out. I think I ended up doing that because this ended up not working out as well as I'd wanted, I think. We'll wait till the rest of the video and see what happens. I think I ended up changing this idea because it didn't really end up fitting correctly up into that next piece. It ended up easier putting it somewhere else. But we'll see. I can't really remember what happened on this. But the techniques are still all the same. So I'm just gluing this little guy in place and giving this form. Yeah, you can see I've taken it out. So that's how it's going to go, but after playing around, I found that that's not the way to do it. This piece can go in the front, and these little teeth, I had no idea what they were for, but what they did in the previous former was you put them in vertically and didn't leave them out. And what they do is give glue surface for that piece. See how that's going to go in on those sides, and those teeth are glue surface, which again, I was so confused. I had them sticking out, and I could not figure out how on earth they were working. Then I realized that's what you do with them. So see, they're giving you a little shelf to put that on. So I ended up, this part is correct. This goes in. I just lined it up with the parts that are in the center. So once I line these up center-wise, you can see I just push it down, and I know if I push it down flat, then I'm contorting the paper to be following the former. And now I'm testing it, and you can see those tabs from that upper piece coming down, and that piece will slip right on there, and you push and kind of crush the air scoop a little bit, but that thing comes around and fits really nicely on either side, amazingly well. But again, I found out leaving that rear former off, G, is the way to do this. There it is. So that's going to fit. But I'm still trying to figure out what's going on. Then I realized the next piece is probably going to be helpful. So there I'm putting glue on those teeth. I decided to go ahead and glue this thing in. Seems like it's going to fit just fine. It's a little tricky to get on because it's not it's a positive fit. It all fits, but it's not sort of stuck on and held on anyway. It's sort of lying there and flying out in the breeze. But you can see it's straight. There's that scoop underneath. It's going along where it's supposed to. Looks pretty dang nice. It amazes me because that's a very complex shape down there. The whole airplane's that way, but I was really pleased. Now, there's the offending G. And what I realized is the next piece that goes in, which is this piece, is going to be where that's going to actually fit in. And then it's going to work perfectly. So I figured that out. So this was another complex piece that you cut out with all these little extras, and I just glued them where they're supposed to go. And you'll see when this piece folds around, you'll see how that little piece will fill in like this, and then you will just match up those little dotted lines, and you end up with a piece that has those little skinny teeth, which will become clear later. Everything else actually works. And so I was very pleased I finally figured this out. So here I am lining up this one. Again, putting it so those lines are even and getting them started, and then shifting that piece of paper there until the little dotted lines come together, and you have a nice shape. Now I'm test fitting this yet again, and you can see those little saw teeth are going to fit in right there, and they're going to fit in down on that air scoop, and that's amazing that that's going to look that good. It actually falls all the way around, follows that great, and it's going to look really good. It looks like the real thing. It's so cool. These paper models really teach you something about how these things are put together. So off camera, I put in that rear former in there. I believe it needed a little bit of tape. And then there's G. There's the little sucker. See, if I put it in there, it fit, and it gave me a nice place. And you can see that just fits right in like a step. It's wonderful. Once I figured that out and didn't put G in the former before it. So making sure there's glue on all the correct surfaces. Go ahead and slide that in place, and it practically slaps together like a plastic model at this point. The bottom has a little bit of tweaking it needs to do, but that is a step, but I don't know why. But there's other parts of panel lines that work just great. Both of them are the same way on either side, but maybe again on the real airplane it was like that. Now, one thing I had to do was I ended up cutting this just with a little piece of a little dart out of it, essentially, like dressmaking dart, and that allowed me to fold those pieces down and get out a bulge that was there. I'm probably going to hit this with a little putty and sand it better, but that's a place where I must have done something that is incorrect. But ultimately, look at that. You get the whole rear fuselage together, and dang it if it doesn't look like the real thing. And look how massive that sucker is. That's a foot long. That's a big airplane, and the tail's not even on it yet. Man, this is going to be really cool when it's done. And sitting on gear, can't wait.